Now, I often discuss the increasing awareness so many parents are gaining of the radical, hypersexual, woke, and divisive material that has infiltrated public schools across America. Now, this is not new, but it's kind of like a tsunami. You know, it used to be a trickle. Now it's swamped our schools. Well, as a result, parents are rising up and reaping the benefits that come from engagement. Joining me now in studio to discuss this is Alvin Lui, president of Courage is a Habit, love that name, and Meg Kilgannon, senior fellow for education studies at the Family Research Council. Alvin, Meg, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, I always say courage breeds courage. And so I want to start with, well, first of all, let me just set the stage. You're involved in education and what's happening in the educational establishment and how our children are being indoctrinated, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay, so I want to find out, just share with our viewers and our listeners your story. I mean, you moved from California to the Midwest,
right,
thinking, oh, I'm escaping Nutville.
That's right.
And you land up right there with the same type of stuff.
Well, the seeds were planted, and because moving from California to Indiana is like going back 20 years in a good way. And it's like watching the same movie happen over again. The only difference is I recognize it because I've lived through it. And people there made the same mistakes we did in California. It's not happening. It can't be that bad. It won't happen here in a red state. And so when I saw that, I realized that you can't run from it. And like I always said, nobody's escaping the United States to Cuba in the middle of the night. So you either stand and fight, or the rest of the country looks like California and worse.
So, all right, you saw there was a problem, but can't somebody else fix it?
Well, that's what we said in California too, and no one did. And so I think this country's built on people, and the people who have something at stake. I have a lot at stake.
Yeah.
And so, my great-grandfather ran from communism in China when he was an older man. And, moving to a country he didn't know. Now, moving from California to Indiana is a whole lot less traumatic, but there's no place for my children to go. There's no place for anybody's children to go.
What frightens you most about this agenda and what's happening in our schools?
Well, they're creating a nation full of social justice activists or revolutionists, no different than the Red Guard, no different than any other country that's turned socialism or communism.
Wait a minute. I'm going to make sure that our viewers heard that. So you're saying that what's happening in the schools very similar to what happened in communist China?
Absolutely. It's the same blueprint. The first thing they have to do is they have to separate the children from their families. Now, in most other countries, they can do it by class. But here in America, you can't do it by class, so you have to do it by race, by sex. And that's what they're doing in the schools, is they're slowly, and not so slowly, brainwashing kids to hate America, to be anti-American, and to separate them from their families.
Well, and actually, you have obtained, by going to these conferences
Right.
of the American Counselors Association,
Yeah.
you've gone and you've captured video
Right.
of them actually driving that wedge between parent and child. I want to play a clip here. This is the ethics chairperson and former president Carolyn Stone
Right.
at a conference this past summer in Austin, Texas. Play clip number 13.
Okay, school counselors, solve this for me. Do you tell her go back and convince the student to tell her parent? Or do you tell her 2, call the girl's mother yourself and confess? Or do you tell her 3?
Hold your breath and pray.
Turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor what you're going to tell her. 3, I hear. See? You are all ready to be part of the ethics committee, so sign up.
Alvin, give us the context there.
So what you didn't see in the clip is that she started this is the opening, by the way. This is the opening speech for their conference. It's called No Limits, which is very obtuse because you're around kids a lot. But anyway, so she starts off by saying that a young counselor went to her and said that she took a young girl to get contraceptives against the mother's wishes. And she said, and then that's when the clip started, she goes, there are 3 choices. Either 1, you tell the girl to tell her mother what happened. 2, you confess to it. Or 3, you hold your breath and pray, meaning that hopefully mother doesn't find out. And then you heard everybody laugh, pick number 3. And so that's just one of many examples where school counselors and social workers today are training school counselors across the country in every school district to keep secrets from parents. And they are the biggest purveyors of the transgender cult. And most people don't know that because they think that they're just the guidance counselors of the past.
Meg,
Right.
they're lying.
They are.
They're,
They are.
And they're teaching, they're telling counselors to lie to parents.
They are, and this is why it's so very important that we all have challenges in our relationships with our kids, but parents have to be the most important relationship that children have, because they're counting on the child not telling the mom, right, and not telling the dad, and this enabling of this dynamic is so dangerous. We have to stay in touch with our kids.
It's a really good point, Meg. So, Alvin, it appears that those that are advancing this agenda that you said that runs parallel to the communist agenda are exploiting a divide we have in our culture between parent and child.
Right. And the way they're doing it is what we call language contamination, Tony. And there's two words that they're redefining. Okay, they're contaminating is safety and abuse. There's nothing else your audience gets from this. I want them to remember this. The school counselors and social workers are redefining two words, safety and abuse. Up until this point, everybody knows what safe means for a child and what unsafe means. Today, it means that if you don't succumb to the transgender delusion, if you don't call them by the right pronoun, if you don't give them the puberty blockers, you are unsafe, and the school is a safe place. And with that, they're going to be able to exercise existing laws that protects actual abuse.
By changing the language right in front of our faces.
Well, when you change the words, you don't have to change the laws.
Right.
You just
So you
exercise
expand, you change the definition so that the laws that are currently there will cover what you're doing.
That's right. And that's why we call it language contamination. And they do that with all the words that they use.
All right, I want to play another one of these clips of Miss Stone. I want to play clip number 13, please. Number 12.
Our kids are being erased by laws such as Parents' Bill of Rights and the Stop Woke Act. There's actually a Stop Woke Act. You refuse to remain comfortable in your role as long as there's one student left out of the success equation. Yes, learn the rules so that you know how to break them.
Did I hear that correct, Alvin, that she says, you need to know the rules so you know how to break them?
That's absolutely right. And so what she means by that is that every state now are starting to pass anti-CRT laws that you can't force pronouns, those kind of things. And so she goes, you have to know what laws your state has so that you can break them. So that's why when places like Florida that had the parental rights bill, when they go, that's not needed, is absolutely needed. And every state should be following suit because she's saying to her, remember, she's training all these counselors now. This isn't just a small, this is their annual conference. And so that's what she means. You have to learn your district's rules so you can break them.
Now, again, you've moved from California, Indiana. Is this stuff in Indiana?
Absolutely.
So if it's in Indiana, it's everywhere.
It's absolutely everywhere. And it's coming through under the Trojan horse of mental health programs called social emotional learning. And that's probably a lot more complicated than we have time for. But all parents have to know is that when they're talking about social emotional learning and they use these wonderful terms like, oh, we're just teaching empathy, we're just teaching personal responsibility, it doesn't mean what you think it means. And this is why it's that language contamination.
So, Meg, as more parents become aware and you have more organizations that have arisen just in the last couple of years, like Alvin's, and you were at the Department of Education in the Trump administration. Do you see any sign that that this is putting the left on their heels, or they're taking notice that there is pushback and it's coming even stronger?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that they're having a conference topic devoted to this idea of, knowing what the law is so you can subvert it, right? They are very aware that parents are on to them.
So it's working.
It's working.
So we need to double down.
We need to double down, absolutely. Because the way it was when we were kids, when it was the team adults, all for the good of the children, right? And the parents and the teachers were working together.
Well, and your parents would go to school and they would trust the teacher.
Right.
And then you were in trouble when they were talking about you. Right?
Exactly. That's no longer the dynamic now. The child is now used as a wedge between those two power structures, right? And because of this dynamic that Alvin is talking about this revolutionary moment that we find ourselves in.
Alvin, so we just got a few minutes left, and I want to run out of time before I do this. What resources do you have available for parents that can help them understand what's going on and to get them involved?
So it's really important that parents take action rather than just take in the information. So if you go to courageisahabit.org, all our tools and resources are made for the average parent. And at the end of every resource, we always have a call to action. So for example, the school counselors I talk about, if you go on courageisahabit.org, we have a section called Exposing School Counselors. And if you go there, you can download all the videos and more that you showed. You only showed a little bit of it. At the end, there's an opt-out form. And we teach parents how to make sure that the child doesn't have any informal or formal meetings with school counselors or social workers. And we also created something we just released 2 weeks ago called Stranger Danger. And we give 5 strategies for every parent in any household, no matter how old the child is. They can modify it for their family dynamics. And we teach the child also what to do when they're getting talked to by the school counselors. You know, parents do that when we're little.
Yeah,
If strangers approach you with a candy or a puppy, if someone grabs you at a department store, this is what you do. For some reason, parents stop doing that and helping kids defend themselves. So not only do we give parents tools on how to fight back at school and to stay on offense. We always talk about stay on offense, don't get on defense. We also give parents strategies to talk to their kids so that their kids can defend themselves as well.
So when those guidance counselors are approaching you with birth control, you can say stranger danger.
That's exactly right.
But there's another layer here that I want to get into for just a couple of minutes that's made this, number one, shows me that you are clearly onto something, but number two, reveals just how difficult this process is, and that is the fact that you had the American Counseling Association going to the big providers like Amazon that had your web provider housed, trying to take your stuff down.
They did. So we have 4 parts right now for the behind closed doors to expose them. We have a lot more coming out this year. When we released part 1, within 5 days, the American School Counselor Association went to Amazon, where we hosted the first PDF and the videos, and Google. So Amazon's our web provider, and Google is where we house it. They went to both places to get it taken down, and they took it down. Both Amazon and Google took it down.
And their rationale?
They just said it was copyright. They didn't even really give a reason. They just said it was copyright, and that was
I mean, this collusion with big tech and the left is, I mean, it's pervasive.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen with the Twitter file release how the Biden administration was working in collusion with big tech. I mean, it is everywhere. Conservatives need to understand that it is more difficult now than ever really to get information through all of these filters that are trying to keep parents in the dark.
Absolutely. Now, we were fortunate enough that, we're able to move it to another place that they couldn't touch it. But that's because there were some people out there who may not be in the front lines like some of us, that were doing it, but they're doing what they can. And so, we had a couple of guys that said, hey, I have this server where you can put it here, and it's a private, and then they can't touch it. So everybody's doing something, even if you can't see it. So there's a lot of confidence, there's a lot of positivity, but people got to take action. They got to step up, and they got to do what they can, even within their own lane.
And parents need to be involved. I think it starts with those conversations. Parents need to take responsibility in their own home, having conversations with their kids. And that, frankly, this begins when they're very, very young.
Yes.
So that you have that established relationship. So if you got little kids, you need to start those conversations now. But even if you have not had the best of relationships, there's always time to start having those conversations with your kids. Then, as a parent, you need to be informed of what's going on. Go to the website, courageisahabit.org. Information there. But then there's another level, Meg, and that is, it's good to be informed and to take individual action, but we need new school board members.
We sure do.
And we're seeing that. In fact, this midterm election, while the national elections when it came to Congress were not as overwhelming as we had hoped, still a lot of school boards switched hands.
A lot of school boards switched hands. A lot of school boards now have a conservative controlling majority, or not even a conservative controlling majority, a parental controlling majority, right? It's beyond ideology in some cases. It's just common sense.
And this kind of information is very helpful because these school board members can say, all right, I saw this. Is this happening here in our school?
Right. And when parents who have concerns, go to school board members. The good ones that want to help you, when you go to them and ask them for something, it gives them a reason to bring it up at the
Right,
next school
right,
board
exactly.
meeting, right? You're working to help get these things adjudicated and discussed in a forum where you can have a vote and make a decision that matters.
Alvin, how are parents responding to the information that you're presenting?
I would say, though, that's been one of the most unexpected things for me when I go to speak in events where parents come up to me and they're practically in tears going, "Thank you so much for releasing this tool. We didn't know what to say. We didn't know what to do. And then we printed this up, we brought it to school boards, or we printed this up and we brought it to our parent group. And now we feel like we know what to say, we know what to do."
Yeah.
And part of it also, that courage is a habit. We also go to different states as well, specifically to help different school districts specifically. And we don't fight for them as much as we teach them how to fight.
That's so important. Alvin Lui, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
And Meg, always great to see you.
Great to see you, Tony.